Okay, so now that you made a table of your two ingredients and how they are related to each other, we're going to go ahead and represent our data table another way with a graph on the coordinate axis. So as you can see, we have two factors we're looking at. We have two ingredients that are related to each other. For every 3 cups of brown sugar, there's 1.5 teaspoons of salt. So whatever you do to the sugar, the salt gets affected by that. So we also want to visually represent this relationship with a graph. So the way we're going to do this, so below your table, you can go ahead and write graphing your data. You can go ahead and pause the video here while you write that down and then keep playing when you're finished. Okay, so first you already have graphing lines in your notebook because you have a graphing notebook, but you're going to go ahead and on your graphing lines, you're going to create a coordinate axis. So if you're familiar with that, it's great. You can just draw one. I'm just going to take one and put it on the notebook here. So really important that we're going up to 20. See what's one that fits. So I'm going to use this one and put it in my notebook. You already have these lines, so you're just going to go ahead and create that go to 20 and 20. So as you can see on this one we have negative numbers. Obviously we can't have negative cups of brown sugar or negative teaspoons of salt, so I'm just going to use the positive aspect of this. Now, very important when it comes to any graph you have. The very first thing you always have to do is label your axes. So your x-axis, that's this horizontal one right here, right there. Sorry. This is your this blue line right here that's horizontal, left, right. That's your x-axis. That's your independent variable. That's kind of what determines the relationship. So it's always important to label your x-axis. So I'm going to go ahead and just write down next to my x-axis that this is sorry. Okay, so this is x. Oh, it's a little too far. Maybe I'll do this, might be better. Okay, so, oops. Okay, this is your x-axis. It is the independent variable. So I'm going to add it to that. And it's your input, right? That's another way we've been saying it. And in this case, our input, so here's our input, is cups of brown sugar. So it's always good to label what the specific unit you are looking at. So in this case, we are looking at cups of brown sugar. So it's always important to write what your x-axis actually is. The y-axis, the one that goes up and down, is your dependent variable. So, right, for every brown sugar, every 3 cups of brown sugar, the salt depends on how much brown sugar you have. So the salt is determined by the brown sugar. The salt is dependent on your brown sugar. So that's why your y-axis, this up-down axis, is your dependent variable. So let's go ahead and label that. And it is also your output, right? And similarly to the x-axis, it's always important to label what your units are. So in this case, our y-axis is your teaspoons of salt. Okay? So this is really important because then somebody looking at your graph knows exactly what you're talking about. Oh, brown sugar and salt are related in this graph, in this recipe. Okay. The other thing that's really important is to scale your graph. So as you can see, we went up to 20 cups. So I scaled my independent variable as 20 and my dependent variable as 20. If I'm looking at 100 cups, obviously this graph would not be good enough. It wouldn't be big enough. I'd have to go all the way to 100. Or if we're only looking at 2 cups, it would be stupid to, well, not stupid, but it would be kind of pointless to go all the way to 20 cups if we're just looking at 2 cups, right? So depending on your quantities, how much of the thing you're looking at, you want to scale your graph appropriately. So now that you have your graph, it is scaled correctly and it is labeled accurately, now you can start graphing your data. So hopefully you were able to fill out the whole table that you have for your 2 ingredients. Again, these labels are dependent on the ingredients you chose. Maybe you chose something else. You know, maybe you chose chocolate chip cookies and vanilla. So whatever it is you had, you have to label your graph. Then you're going to look at your data table that you made, and you're going to look at the input and the output. So notice for every 3 cups of brown sugar, so I'm going to write that down, you need 1.5 teaspoons of salt. This way that I wrote it, okay, is how you write a point on your graph. The very first number is always your x coordinate, and then you do a comma, and the second number is your y coordinate. So you tell me what the independent variable is, your input, and then you're telling me your output. For every 3 cups of brown sugar, I have to have 1.5 teaspoons of salt. These 2 coordinates then tell you the point on your graph. So I'm going to go ahead and get a dot. Okay, I know that for every 3 cups of brown sugar, so 1, 2, 3, I need 1.5 teaspoons of salt. So I have a point right here at 3, 1.5, because it's showing me for every 3 cups of brown sugar, I get 1.5 teaspoons of salt. Every 3 cups of brown sugar, 1.5 teaspoons. Then I can graph all the other data in my table. So for every 2 cups of brown sugar, I get 1 teaspoon of salt. So I can go ahead and get my dot, or get another dot. And I know that for every 2 cups of brown sugar, I get 1 teaspoon of salt. So it would be right there. So go ahead and do this for all your data points. So for every 2 cups of brown sugar, I get 1 teaspoon. Okay. So go ahead, graph all your data in your table and see if you can figure out, if you can see some kind of pattern to what's going on. So after you graph your data, answer this question. What do you notice about the points you graphed for your data? Why do you think this is happening? So first, graph your data points, then don't copy the question, but answer it in your notebook. What do you notice about the points you graph for your data, and why do you think this is happening? So go ahead, finish up graphing and answering this question. Take a photo of your graph and your answer, and then upload it on Dreamseedo.